Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. We're glad you're here. And now our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
Have you ever heard some well-meaning person say, you just need to calm down. Leave it alone. Give it some time. It'll get better. Does it ever help to say these things? Probably not. When people are in conflict, they're experiencing some sort of emotional pain. So to say, just get over it, it's minimizing their experience, and it sometimes even escalates the situation. Navigating interpersonal conflict is tricky. It's not fun, but it's a skill that is absolutely required for managers. Unfortunately, most employers don't offer a lot of training on the topic. Instead, we spend significant time training managers on how to do their jobs or what employment laws require. And very rarely do we see companies focusing on providing tools and resources for employees to manage conflict and de-escalate conflict at work. In this episode, I speak with Carol Bowser. She's an attorney and founder of Conflict Management Strategies, and we discuss conflict management at work and the consequences of poorly managed conflict at work. This episode will have important takeaways for everyone, especially those of us who work with imperfect people who need to come together to get stuff done. I think that includes just about all of us. So sit back and enjoy this episode of the Mission First, People Always podcast.
Welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast, where we talk about better business results, stronger teams, more successful careers, and happier lives. Along the way, we hope to bust some biases, build some bridges, and have some fun. We're glad you're here. And now, our host, Dr. Mike Patterson.
Carol Bowser is a workplace conflict expert. After practicing employment law for several years, she founded Conflict Management Strategies when she realized a lawsuit can't deliver the level of resolution and satisfaction that is gained when people are actively involved in creating solutions to their own workplace conflicts. Carol's clients come from a wide range of employers because conflict is universal across all industries and types of organizations. Where there are people, there is conflict. And the key is to help people recognize and address conflict before it damages working relationships and creates organizational drag. In her over 20 years of experience, she has discovered some universal themes about workplace conflict and loves to share how people at all levels can strengthen their conflict resolution muscles. You can contact Carol at cb@managingconflict.com. Now let's get on with the conversation. Carol Bowser, welcome to the Mission First People Always podcast. I'm glad you're here.
I am glad to be here, Mike.
Well, it's a beautiful day in Southern California. Carol, where are you having this conversation from?
I am having it with one of the great cities in the Pacific Northwest, Tacoma, Washington, where it is gorgeous outside. The tulips are blooming, the daffodils are blooming, and all of the trees are in bloom. It is an amazing, amazing spring day before it's supposed to start raining on Friday night.
Well, spring is a wonderful time of year. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us to talk about conflict management. I like to emphasize the importance of preventing conflict if we can, but once we find ourselves in it, we've got to figure out a way to navigate through it effectively. And so you're a conflict management expert, an attorney who's practiced employment law. Your focus now is not so much the legal process, but the human process of managing conflict. So we're going to just chat about what real people in the real world who have to get things done with imperfect people can do to prevent and manage conflict more effectively. So let's jump in with just kind of the business case for doing conflict better. In other words, as business people, as organizational leaders, can we afford to let conflict get out of hand?
Well, I think everybody knows the answer is that when it starts escalating, it causes what I refer to as organizational drag. Many managers report that sometimes up to like 80% of their time is dealing with people issues. And whether that is trying to influence, trying to coach, trying to manage conflict, trying to manage the cascading impacts of conflict where people start building coalitions or start gossiping, that your time and energy is expended in that way, and the people's time and energy. And no one, when they start businesses or organizations, thinks that the vast amount of resources in time, energy, and money are going to be dealt with messy people issues. It's like, no, we want people to bring their brains and all of their brains and their best selves to be able to tackling the work and not be emotionally derailed with trying to deal and manage uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, it's such a tremendous drain and drag, as you said. It's a big waste of time often, and there's some real cost associated with conflict. You spent a good chunk of your career practicing employment law, mediator, and conflict management trainer for years now. Can you tell us any juicy stories about really ugly aspects of conflict that none of us want to find ourselves in? We want to stay out of those really bad situations. But let's do a scared straight moment here on the show. Tell us some scary stories.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind that are sort of universal themes. And I've seen so many people use the word harassment, toxic work environment, bullying going on. And if you have been in the workplace for any length of time, you know that those couple of words make everything come to a screeching halt and get attention. And you get attention. It may not be the good attention or the fix it attention you think it is, but I've seen that where people, many, many times where they're using these words in an attempt to say, I am in a point of pain, fix this. And then I mean, I can't even tell you how many times this happens. So then human resources get involved, managers get involved, uppers get involved, attorneys get involved, and then what they end up saying is, you know what? We did an investigation. This doesn't meet the policy definition of harassment or toxic work environment or bullying. And it doesn't even meet the legal definition. So no, it doesn't really happen. It's unsubstantiated. And then the person who is accused feels targeted. And I will say this especially, I've seen this especially with men when a female accuses them of harassment or discrimination, they feel like that is a scary, scary, scary place to be because all of a sudden they are labeled that. And then they're looking at this as, potential career ruining. I'm going to be going around with this mark. I don't feel as though, it might be that they didn't do anything wrong, but it might be that they were in an interpersonal conflict. And then when you look at the other side of it, it's so many of my clients, even after the allegation, and if there was an investigation and it was deemed unsubstantiated, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission will tell you that like an overwhelming number of complaints are for retaliation. So then the employer is freaked out about, setting themselves up for a retaliation claim. And there may indeed be performance issues, or they're like, what, there were performance issues before, and someone made this allegation. And we feel as though that we are stuck with this person where there were documented performance issues, but then someone said this, and now we feel as though it is unsafe for us to terminate employment or have any type of disciplinary or coaching because we're afraid we're going to get sued. And so I mean, it's a consistent underlying force, like gravity. And if people were able to kind of address the issues or the concerns so much more proactively, or even recognize that these things were brewing, and attempt to address it. And here's my former employment lawyer thing: document it, document it, document it. Nobody is then in these scary situations. The rest of the employees aren't like, HR and management does nothing about this situation. The manager doesn't feel targeted. The employee doesn't feel heard. I mean, the technical term is it's a hot mess.
It seems like it's a slippery slope into a death spiral, unless we know how to um, address that pain. And I think you made a really important point there. The employee that speaks out and uses those hot button terms like harassment, toxic work environment, bullying, that is the result of feeling something painful, uncomfortable, that's driving them to use those words. Because I think most people are not evil, horrible people that just want to create a hot mess. They are feeling some sort of pain. So how do we address it sooner rather than later as we're sliding into the abyss?
Yeah, I affectionately call it the sucking vortex of pissed off.
Yeah,
Uh,
great
so
term.
I think that it is a way of recognizing when people are attempting to get to get your attention, but beforehand, and for managers and supervisors, of like, how well do you know your people? And I want to go off on a related topic of this, that the vast majority of people are not comfortable bringing things forward. They're uncomfortable, they're embarrassed, they may kind of soft sell it. And in fact, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission several years ago, they did a task force on harassment in the workplace. And to elaborate this point, I mean, every single employer, or every single employer, should have a policy that says we're harassment discrimination free. And that policy should also say, if you have concerns, talk to your supervisor. If you're not comfortable, talk to, any other supervisor, talk to HR and keep bringing it up. But, study after study shows the vast majority of people won't. And in fact, the EEOC did a study and found that most people avoid it, downplay it, ignore it, and endure it, or they talk to friends and family about it. So it is really difficult that as an employer, as a manager, you could say, please come to me, please come to me. I have an open door policy. However, as a manager and supervisor of people, being able to get to know your people well enough of, how comfortable would they be coming to you? And for the managers and supervisors out there, I'd be willing to bet exactly who the person was who was going to be comfortable, and they are going to come to you repeatedly. Who is it that won't come to you? Who is going to be needing, opportunity after opportunity, to, have the door open, or you even just noticing, is there a change in behavior? Is there a change in attendance? Is there a change in productivity? All of those types of things, of knowing your people well enough to be able to say like, hey, I've noticed something different. But even if you are as proactive and not just doing it in a token response, we still maybe kind of are in a little bit of denial. Maybe we're placating people, or maybe we're trying to say, hey, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. Don't, maybe you just need to calm down. And when we use these phrases that we think are trying to de-escalate and might be empathetic, what we're really doing is we're denying their experience. And you're setting them up to say, like, this person doesn't get it. And then they are then swimming in that, like, bad emotional place, feeling not heard, maybe feeling betrayed. And they're going to go and talk to other people and not you. And
So,
so that's, yeah.
so that's what you mean when when you say, the title of this episode is let me never say calm down, how people unintentionally escalate conflict on their teams. So is that what we're talking about here? How people think they're doing the right thing, but in fact, they're doing the wrong thing. They're trying to de escalate when in fact, they're actually digging a deeper hole or making the problem worse. What exactly do we mean by never say calm down?
Exactly, that it seems like it's a really empathetic approach. And what we're saying is, you're being too emotional about this. You're not being logical at all. I need for you to calm down so I can understand what's going on. And it's again, as you highlighted, it may come from a good place, but it has the exact opposite effect because it is just really minimizing their their experience. And in as much as you say, I've got, an open door, come and talk to me. I'm sure everything will work out fine. It may not work out fine. And what you really want to be able to do is a is acknowledge their experience and acknowledge the high level of emotion that they're having, both good and bad, because some people can be overly happy and excited about stuff and not pay attention to it. But what I think your audience is most interested in is what happens if we're dealing with high level of emotions and it feels uncomfortable and it feels icky. And I do things like to placate, like letting people know everything's going to work out, or or I just want them to slow down or calm down. It's gonna have the opposite impact.
I work with managers every week, and I don't, I can't remember one of those managers saying, "Hey, I've got a lot of extra time on my hands. My calendar is pretty open this week. Let me spend some extra time talking to people very methodically about how they're doing, how they're feeling about these difficult topics." So, and I'm being facetious, obviously. Managers are busy. They've got things coming at them constantly. There's never a dull moment, as they say. So, how can managers, is there a simple framework to prepare for some of these difficult conversations with people? What can they anticipate happening? How can we do that well in the midst of all the other demands on our time?
Okay, so a couple of different things. First, I don't think it needs to be laborious. I often say, usually you give people 3 minutes, 180 seconds, and a lot of your check ins may be, very brief. However, are you looking for words and phrases that indicate there may be something going on? And so one of my favorites is fine. Most times when people say fine, it's not fine. So it could be a very simple phrase. Okay, tell me more. Another thing is that if people are seeming reluctant or hesitant to be able to talk, just being able to say, help me understand, what's going on for you. I want to be able to highlight these don't need to be, I'm taking an hour or 25 minutes off of my schedule to be able to do this, because you already know that those things, that who those people are. But one of the things that I also say, aside from being alert to certain words and phrases, don't take words like fine, it's okay on their face, because in the US culture, when we say how are things going, when people say fine, it's the same as saying hello. In most cases, it's just kind of a social courtesy, it's a shorthand. But when you are asking, and as a manager or supervisor, you are the eyes and ears of the organization, and you have a liability and a duty to see and prevent issues that are going on in bad ways, but also see and address issues that are going on in a good way and reinforce those. So, one of the things you could do is say, "How's it going?" And they say, "Fine." And you could say, "No, how's it going? Really?" And it doesn't have to be long, and again, long and involved. It can be, fairly short, and it could be, "I don't have time. Okay, it sounds like a bigger issue. Let's find some time to talk about this later." So that's one piece. The other thing is, I want to share with you a little mediator tool. When I was becoming a new mediator, my trainers would tell me, "Hey, if you hear something once, you kind of hear something once, but you're constantly alert and listening, and trying to find out what's going on here. If you hear something twice, it might be that that people are just kind of on a roll and storytelling. It could be that people have forgotten they already brought it up. However, if you heard something three times, if it is three times, it is your obligation to hit the pause button because people will repeat themselves because they don't feel heard. And that's where conflict escalates, where people don't feel heard. So to loop back to the original of, never say calm down. If you're saying calm down, don't worry about it, everything's going to be fine. You're not being logical, don't be so emotional. You're reinforcing to them, they don't get it. They're not hearing me. They're not understanding. So taking that extra short period of time to really kind of listen and not just, it's fine, everything's going okay. Or if people are bringing up concerns, even in subtle ways, more than once, it's to get your attention. And I'm going to say this, if you are a manager and supervisor, you have power. You may not have control, but you have some power, and nobody wants to get on the bad side of their boss. So many people will do this. They'll bring up concerns in very subtle and indirect ways to kind of see how it's going to land with you
Mm.
and then make a determination, is it actually safe to bring things forward?
You bring up a term that I was just thinking about. All the nature of this conversation and your ability to elicit sort of candid insight from your team member really requires there to be a psychologically safe environment and some degree of trust. Would you agree with that? And if that doesn't exist, doesn't it throw all this kind of out the window?
Oh, I'm so glad, Mike, that you brought that up because I have so many feelings about this that oftentimes when I see books, I think there are fantastic books out there where they're talking about, we need to be candid with each other. We need to be able to foster trust, to have a high trusting environment. I would say yes. And I think based on my life experience that is highly aspirational because usually these high degree of candor I have found anyway that the advice is geared towards sort of executive teams and people who seem to have about equivalent power structures within organizations. Yet again, according to the EEOC and time after time, I have heard people say, I don't want to get on my boss's bad side. I don't want to bring this up. I don't feel as though it's safe, or I've brought it up before. And this is one of those scary stories. I have had senior HR people come to me and say, Carol, I hear what you're saying. I have brought that up many, many times, but I've expended all of my social capital. And I feel as though if I bring this up again, my job is at risk.
Mm.
So, I think all of those are very good things, and I also think, I'm gonna throw my husband under the bus a little bit here. I love him and I trust him, but I think trust always goes to a certain degree. I love him and I trust him, but I will say, did you feed the child? Did you get the mail? Did you water the plants? Because I'm not sure that those things are getting done because it's not, kind of his normal operating procedure. So whether there is a high degree of trust or trust people enough at least to follow through, but I'm not sure that everybody trusts their coworkers or their managers and their bosses to fully disclose absolutely everything that they're thinking and feeling. So that's why I think managers and supervisors need to be very, very aware that there is going to be a reluctance to fully disclose. But are you getting enough to get a picture about what is important to the person?
Now, we talked about the 180-second conversation, check-in conversation with folks, to take the temperature of how they're doing. And then you said, if it seems like we need more time, let's schedule that time, have a more formal conversation about this. What are how do you set and manage expectations for those kind of sit down, closed door kind of conversations about serious and sensitive stuff?
So I want to go one step back because because it could be that this conversation is going to take more time and just from more time to like a behind closed door, there's a serious thing going on. There's a continuum. And
Okay.
so maybe think of conversations as a continuum. And then the next part of that conversation is, you raised some things that got me curious. Curiosity is a good place because you can be curious. You can ask, kind of curiosity based questions about help me understand, what's going on. What about this? Do you think that I could be paying more attention to? Lots of open ended kind of curiosity based questions. And sometimes through those curiosity based conversations, that person gets more clarity about what's going on. You get more clarity what's going on. So, by way of a real life story, I had a conversation with someone, and they were kind of a group of people in a training, and I had them kind of talk about areas that are concerning or conversations they could have to maybe increase collaboration. And as always, there's the prompt that you give the group, and then there's the stuff that they really want to talk about. And so they started kind of talking and complaining about something. And then we were, I think, specifically talking about the roles that people play and what level of authority everybody has. And then through this conversation, the group realized, like, hey, we're asking our boss to do something that we realize they have absolutely no authority to do.
Hmm.
And so it's like, then that little aha light bulb moment was we are getting upset and frustrated and disappointed in our boss, yet our boss does not have the authority to be able to do this. And we know this. So then it's okay, well, who do we need to have this conversation with? So I think going starting those from, curiosity, exploratory type of conversations. I hate to use the word kind of discovery conversations because that feels a little bit salesy to me. However, if you think about it, I need to discover what is going on for this person. And a framework you can use in preparing yourself for that conversation is just simply, thinking about, as a result of this conversation, what do I want to know from this conversation? So you're kind of doing a little bit of, 30-second pre-work. Like, what do I want to know? What am I curious about? As a result of this conversation, what do I want this person to possibly do? Or what do I need to do? But also going back to your idea about trust and psychological safety and more dynamic and impactful conversations, how do I want this person to feel?
Mm.
And so you're looking at that emotional intelligence, you're looking at like specific goals for the conversation, and you're also looking at kind of longer term strategy. So just being able to think of like know, do, feel. And it could be as simple as like, hey, we had this conversation. You brought up something, you said, it's fine. I said, tell me more about that. And you started saying, well, I've got this problem with this person and they're doing this. And, it's just really kind of frustrating. I want to learn more about that. And then, as a result of this conversation, I'm going to try to figure out, what I or you can, do as a next step to be able to address this. But then also, I want us to feel as though this is this is a reasonably comfortable environment. So you can participate, and tell me as much as you're comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable, you need time to gather your thoughts, let me know. And we can do that because, there are some people, maybe hosts of podcasts, who can think on their feet. There are other people who want to really sit down and process
Right.
things and come up with answers. And usually these, you know, meetings are designed and support people who can think on their feet. So being able to do that kind of know, do, feel analysis, and then be able to make sure you're not doing the, just calm down, everything's going to be okay, don't worry about it type of response.
I love that, Carol, and you've been giving us some great free advice here on the podcast today. But tell us a little bit about your work, the services you provide. You're a trainer, speaker, mediator. What does that entail? What does a typical client engagement look like for you if there is a typical client engagement? I'd like to know more about the value you add to organizations you serve.
Great. Well, thank you so much for asking. And like any good consultant or attorney, I'm going to say it depends. Sometimes people call me because they've got a presenting issue. Maybe it's they have conflict brewing. Maybe it that allegations or an investigation has happened, and the folks need to get back together. And so sometimes a typical engagement is the individuals involved in an investigation or a complaint or just kind of maybe past bad blood need some help and skills in order to create a path forward. Because how many times have you heard this? We don't need them to like each other. We need them to be able to work together. Yet they're trying to figure out how to do that without repeating past habits. So sometimes I'm called in to kind of coach those individuals to be able to have a really customized in-time professional development to deal with this particular situation. And then sometimes it's they are at an impasse and we want to sit down and have a facilitated conversation. If it's just a small group, then one or two people, then I kind of sit down and help them mediate some type of resolution or path forward. Sometimes it's large groups. Sometimes it is, entire teams that are at an impasse, or there might be coalition building within the teams that it's working with the whole group. I'm also a fairly well-known speaker and trainer and, conference presenter. And so when people, I often say it's building those conflict resolution muscles, building those communication muscles. So people see there's an opportunity for organization-wide professional training. I do that, and that's super fun because then you have everybody learning in real time, skills and techniques. And I often say if they can't do it in the classroom or in the training environment together, they won't be able to do it when it really counts. And often, it can be fun and it can be engaging, and we can bring a sense of humor to even tough subjects. And then sometimes, going back to the coaching, sometimes just individual leaders want to be able to increase their skill sets and they need kind of a safe landing place to talk about stuff. And I have never had a coaching client who didn't ask in some way, shape, or form, how do I manage? How do I manage laterally? Because those can be tough. And you don't necessarily want to have those conversations with your boss of, how do I manage up to you? So those are some of
Right.
the things that I do.
So the quote of the episode may be conflict is fun. Um, Not sure everyone would agree with that, but it sounds like you do a lot of great work for people who benefit greatly from it. So, Carol, our time is about up today. For my listeners, they know that my final question to all of my guests is, what's a piece of practical advice that the folks listening today can begin applying right away that would make them a better leader, a better teammate, a better human being?
So I think the piece of advice is, even though we ask people to come to us with concerns, you should run on the assumption that it is highly, highly unlikely they ever will. So the onus or the gift is on you to be able to reach out to them and then keep that radar screen open for if there are even little hints of things that are going on. Take a moment, pause, and say, tell me more. And finally, never say, calm down.
Excellent. Carol Bowser, conflict expert. Thank you for being a great guest. If you or someone you know needs help navigating conflict, or better yet, preventing conflict, I'm sure Carol would have some good ideas for you. Her website and social media links are in the show notes. And again, I'm quite sure that Carol would be delighted to hear from you. Real damage results from poorly managed conflict. So if you're a business person, a manager, organizational leader that cares about the mission of your organization, and we're mission first kind of people, this conversation should be a call to action or strengthening our conflict management muscles. So until next time, do great things with great people. Mission first, people always. Let's talk again soon.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to create a stronger, more people-centric and empowered culture for your organization, visit drmikepatterson.com.